Hey everyone, welcome back to Miniature Painting 101, a series of videos where I will be teaching you guys how to paint miniatures from preparation all the way to finalized product. And this is part 6 of my series, how to prepare resin miniatures, specifically GW Finecast, but most of the stuff will apply specifically to resin as well. So here is what you will need to prepare resin or Finecast miniatures. First, you will need a pair of hobby clippers, or hobby cutters as they're called. These will be used to remove the miniatures from the sprue and clean them up. Second, you will need a hobby knife, or X-Acto knife as they're called depending on where you are. The sharper the blade, the better. Obviously if you're a kid, get your parents' supervision before using them. Third, you will need, this is an optional, a hobby file just to sand down areas. Fourth, a cutting board. It will save your table a lot of wear and tear if you're cutting on top of it. And finally, super glue. Remember with resin you can't use plastic glue and you can only use super glue. I use Gorilla Glue, whichever one you prefer. And finally, green stuff. For resin models I specifically recommend liquid green stuff, but normal putty green stuff will also work when filling in the holes. So the first step in preparing resin miniatures may sound weird, but it is buy them in person. Whenever buying resin or Finecast miniatures, buy them in person, not online. And when buying miniatures, here's what you want to look for. The best thing about these new clamshells is that you can see them in back. So take a long look at the miniature you're buying, make sure there are no miscasts, as little bubbles as possible, or bubble holes as I'll show you later. And look at such things as the staffs, the hands, the heads, and look for warps and bends and just gaps. This will save you a lot of time later if you choose an excellent miniature, and there are very big differences between even miniatures of the same specific model at a store. If you choose a good one, it will save you a lot of time. That being said, most online stores will not try to sell you suboptimal miniatures, but it's hard to catch the little things sometimes, and they may ship you one that is not of the best quality. For example, here's one that I bought from an online seller. At first glance, the model actually looks great. When you look at the body of Oberon, great, very little problems, looks like an excellent cast, so all's great. Same from the back, looks great. Obviously the base is a base, so it'll look great too. However, when you get to the staff, you'll notice there is a significant bend, about a 45-degree bend in the head of the staff. And this is not really very nice. So now we will have to take our time and fix that before proceeding to painting the miniature. So it'll cost me a little bit of time. But just remember, if you happen to get a miniature through various methods that is beyond fixable, such as a giant miscast, just call the manufacturer. As you guys can check out in my old miscast video, if you get a large miscast, for example in Finecast, call Games Workshop. They have excellent customer service. I know sometimes we make fun of their products and the quality of their products, but their customer service is amazing, and more times than not they'll just send you a new model free of charge or a new replacement part. So you get the model in the end that you deserve and that you paid for and that you want. So remember, some things aren't completely fixable, then just call the manufacturer. Once you've got an excellent looking product, step 2 is remove the miniature from the sprue or from the bags that have it. When removing resin miniatures from your sprue, be very careful. Use a pair of hobby clippers and try to remove it from the sprue with a little bit of distance between where it actually attaches to the model and the extra flash. Also, do not hold the miniature by any of the very vulnerable thin areas. For example, for Oberon here, he has several parts of his cloak that are very, very thin extra pieces of resin. Do not hold the miniature by those areas. Hold it by the body or by the sprue itself. That way there's no extra pressure put on it and doesn't snap. Same with the staff. Hold the staff in the hardest spot possible and the strongest spot possible, and just quickly remove it, all these extra pieces, using very sharp hobby clippers. The third step is cleaning the model, and by cleaning I don't mean using soap and water, though feel free to. Some people prefer to wash their resin. I don't personally wash my resin models. You can use a similar process from my metal miniatures. What I'm saying is, using a sharp hobby knife, remove the extra flash, like you can see here, from the miniatures. This can typically be found on areas that attach the miniature to the sprue. With these resin models, it can also be on extra flash on things as wiring, on the hands, on the head. Any places that are small typically is where extra flash could build up. As with the previous step, you must be very careful when removing extra flash. Resin is very brittle, therefore don't put any unnecessary pressure on these areas. Support them as much as possible with your hands, and if, for example, removing from the very vulnerable cloak pieces that I'm doing right now, I'm holding it as close as I can to support that piece so there's no extra pressure and no snappage of parts. With the feet, what I typically do is remove a little bit, layer by layer, a little bit at a time, until you get to the actual bottom of the foot to prevent breakage. Another way is if there's a very straight piece and you have a very steady hand, using hobby clippers like I'm doing right now. As you can see, it's a very clean piece of extra flash, so you can remove it quite easily with hobby clippers. Now that the model is all cleaned and ready to go, it's time to fix any of the awkward bends that might be happening on your miniature. For example, the staff of Oberon. There are a few techniques currently being employed by people. First one is using a hairdryer just to heat up the area, bend it to the desired angle, and then put in cold water to instantly cool it. This is a very, very good technique, but is also very risky, as you can't control where the heat goes exactly on the part, and it can quickly melt the miniature. The second is using one hot bowl of water and one cold bowl of water. You put the piece in the hot bowl of water, bend it to the angle you want, and then put in the cold bowl of water. The third one is what I will be showing today, which is my preferred method, using running water from a tap. Using a very thin stream of water, you can concentrate a warm water flow onto the exact area you want to bend it to the angle you want, and then put it in a cold bath of water so that the resin hardens again in a perfectly straight angle. So as I mentioned, the first step in this process is to get some really cold water from the tap and fill a bowl with this cold water. Use your hand, just make sure that it's cold, and fill up a bowl with the cold water. For the second step, turn on the warm water. Don't go too hot. Use warm water and put the area that you want to bend of the resin staff under the water and keep it there. Remember to rotate the part frequently so that both sides are heated up and it doesn't just warp on one side. And slowly just start to bend the part to the angle that you want, very slowly, as the warm water warms up the part. And when it finally gets to the angle that you want, remove it from the water and put it in the cold bath of water. Remember to hold it at the exact angle you want while it's in the cold bath. That way the resin hardens again very hard and you get a straight staff, as you can see here. So in the end, no more giant bend, and it looks great. The next step is to fill in small bubble holes which may have formed during the process of making the miniature. Take a moment and examine your miniature very carefully for maybe small tiny holes which are just formed as a side effect of pouring the resin into the molds, and tiny bubbles. As you can see with my scalpel blade, there's one right there above the leg, right there being circled, and there's a couple on the shoulder pads, for example. There's one right there at the very end of the shoulder pad being circled by the scalpel blade again. The simplest way of filling these holes, if you want to fill them, this is an optional step, is to use green stuff. I prefer, as I mentioned earlier, using liquid green stuff, which is almost like a thick paint. So open up the liquid green stuff, put a little bit on a brush, an old brush that you don't mind getting gross and dirty, and just brush it into the areas that have the holes. Just put it as thin as possible. You don't have to put too much on them. And we're going to clean them up a little bit so it won't look bad. Plus you'll prime over them after, so this green stuff won't show and it'll fill in the gaps perfectly. And I'm just going over all the model, filling in any of these tiny holes with the liquid green stuff. Wait a little bit of time because it takes a while to dry, and when it is dry, take either a hobby file or a hobby knife in this case, and just clean up over it. So you basically just shave off the excess green stuff and leave the hole completely filled in and flush with the rest of the parts. And the final step of preparing Finecast is to obviously glue them together. As I mentioned, the big difference between resin and plastic is you cannot use plastic glue on resin, you have to use super glue. So in the end, it's not as strong of a bond as plastic miniatures. Put a little bit of super glue on each part. I prefer to start with gluing the miniature to its base, so that way you can hold it. When gluing a miniature, remember to hold the super glue pieces together for about 10 to 15 seconds so that it makes sure you get a nice hard bond that will stay for a long time. And then I glued the arms together that I've taken so much time now to make sure that they're clean, they're put together correctly, and that the bend is no longer there in the staff. And once again, I hold them together for about 10 to 15 seconds. And here we have it, a completely prepared, really nice looking Finecast resin miniature that is completely ready to be primed and to be painted. So definitely keep your eyes out soon for a painting tutorial for Vanguard Oberon. He's a very cool miniature and I can't wait to paint him up. So thank you very much for watching as always. Please like the video, comment in the comment section, and subscribe to my channel if you already haven't done so. And stay tuned for next week's video, part 7, which is dedicated to all the types of primers out there.